Oh, so I get a start. Oh, okay. Welcome everyone to this session organized by Data Versioning Interest Group. We have four co-chairs across two continents. Today we have Yan Krom from CSIRO, Leslie Wyborn from Australia Research Data Commons and ANU, and myself, Mingfang Wu, co-chair this session. Next, please. So this slides to remind the RDA guiding principles. That's very heart of the RDA community, the openness, community-driven activity, census-based decisions, and it's non-profit. Any recommendation we coming out is technology neutral. It is harmonization and inclusiveness. We stand by. I hope every participant on this call already a member of the RDA, but if you are not, you are very welcome to join. It's just a simple step to click register a link. It's free, and after you become a member of RDA, you can join and contribute to lots of RDA working group, interest group, and a community of practice. Next, yes. In this session, we have a big chunk of time for discussion. We will use the collaborative notes extensively. So here is the link to the collaborative notes. The link also accessible from the Zoom chat. It would be great if you could sign your name in the collaborative notes. Yeah, thank you. Next. So here is the agenda for our session today. We will have a brief introduction of the group. Then Jens will present the recommendation, actionable guidelines we coming out for the data versioning. And then we have a time to walk through each recommendation or guideline to get your feedback if the guideline clear, understood, if it's feasible to implement, and if not, how hard would it be to implement, what we could do make it easier to implement. Finally, we can wrap up 3 takeaway messages from this session. Next, so yeah, thanks. And this group went long history. Actually, this group, interest group, started in 2016, almost 10 years ago. Then we acknowledged then the data versioning played an important role in science and research reproducibility and the importance of site exact version of dataset used for research, and also understand what changes between versions. So we started this interest group, and soon after we think because there are lots of inconsistent practices across repository, even repository itself. So we think we should make some recommendations to guide the data, the versioning, the data life cycle. So the working group had 18 months produce recommendations. So we collected about 57 user cases around over 30 organizations, how this organization currently practice what the policies and the system and procedures put in place in data versioning. And based on the use case and the conceptual framework, we borrowed from library catalog. Um, that's FOBO stands for Functional Requirement for Bibliography Records. We use this framework and considers existing use cases and coming out six data version principles. And Ian will talk about that shortly. And then after we have these six principles, the feedback we got as a group is that's, principles, but how do we implement that? So at that point, the working group transferred to interest group. So interest group, our goal is to to make recommendations to implement the data versioning principles. So that's one of the goal of the interest group. The interest group and also want to use this forum to discuss issues related to data versioning, data republication, and other things like mirroring and reuse data that's also related to data version. Yeah, so next, Jens will present why we are doing this data versioning and briefly introduce data principles and recommendations. Over to you, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Mingfang, for the introduction to our group and what and I'll give you an introduction to our work and our ideas about versioning that we've developed over those years and the actionable recommendations that we developed. And the starting point, as Ming already said, was the question, what do we mean when we talk about a version? And so this cartoon on the right-hand side is trying to symbolize that there's a stream of bits that we're looking at and looking at where is it the same and where is it different. So just on a technical level, it's very simple to compare to digital objects. You just look at the bit stream and look at whether it's the same or not. So if it is different, that's when we usually call it version. But what does this difference mean? Is it the same format but different content? Is it the same content but different format? What's important about this difference? What are the implications that this has for data management? And when I want to cite this, what, who, and how do I cite? And at what point do I need a new DOI? So to better understand this, Ming already spoke about the versioning use cases, where we recently put out version 1.3. So we originally published 39 use cases, but then added quite a number more, so that we now have a total of 52 use cases that we use as the basis for analysis to find out what are the current practices, which practices can we identify as best practices, and how do we fit them all into a coherent framework. And from this, we published what we call the data versioning principles, published in a paper in the Data Science Journal around the 6 principles of version control, data production, objects and collections, formats, derived products, and the requirements for data citation. And as Ming already said, those principles are quite high level. So the answer to how do we do this was usually it depends, which is an honest answer because you really have to look at the specific situation you're facing to be able to say what to do. But depends on the circumstances. So to clarify what we mean, we went through another round of work to formulate recommendations based on those principles and explain why we made those recommendations. The key step to understand where we're coming from is that we don't only look at the technical difference between two objects by looking at the bit stream, but we also look at the editorial and curatorial processes that lead to that difference. So to distinguish those two, we call the one change the technical change revision. So this is looking at the changes in the bit stream, and this is a process that can be automated. It does not tell us anything about the significance of the change. In the editorial and curatorial process, that's what we call the release. This is something that cannot be automated because it depends on determining the significance of the change. And in this, it is important to communicate the significance of this change to the users of this product. So coming back to this, what does this mean in practice? So this is a case of a data object starting out on the left-hand side along a time axis, and then something is appended and inserted into this object. And so there's now a change, and we as the custodians of this object decided that this is a significant change. And so we made a new release with a new identifier. We kept the old one. To make it easier to find, there's also this umbrella term at the top. You've seen practices like this in Zenodo, where it tells you, or arXiv, where it tells you use this DOI to cite all versions and get to the most recent one. But you will also be directed to the older ones. And this is what you see on the slide. And then in the third step, there was another addition to this object. So we decided that we produce a new release of this with a new identifier. This is probably the most common case that we encounter in data versioning, where a data object gets changed over time. A special case of this is a time series, where we start out with something and then over time new data is appended, but it's not inserted. So time series data is a typical case of this. And to identify things in this time series, we recommend something that's very similar to what we did in the previous case, to define kind of an umbrella object that encompasses the entire time series, but to identify individual points in time, we recommend to either use individually identified snapshots, so taking a snapshot at a certain point in time and giving this an identity, or define a canonical path. A canonical path is a systematic way of leading to the granules in an object. The most commonly understood one in the Western world is the Bible, where you have book, chapter, verse, leading you to the exact position in the text that you want to point to. And to implement this as a persistent identifier, there's a technology called template PIDs, template persistent identifiers, that can be used in the Handle system. And for instance, the Technical Information Library Hannover, the German National Library for Science and Technology, uses this technology to allow you to point to specific positions in videos that they archive. And also quite common is this situation of having a collection of objects, things that belong together, and you want to identify each of the partial objects of this collection and the collection itself. So again, we have this umbrella object at the top that encompasses all of them, and then the individual components with their own identities. Then we already spoke briefly about this question about what is the significance of a change. So just noting that there is a change is a good start, but it's important to communicate to the users what the significance of that change is. Is it just a minor correction? Is it something um, really important, but it doesn't break the system? Or is this something that is such a big change that it requires changes downstream on the user side? And here, two synthetic examples to illustrate what that could mean. On the left-hand side, we changed this number 3.14 to 31.4, which is obviously a change that most would see as significant, but it's actually a very small edit distance. And depending on the situation, it actually might not be a significant change. That is one of those it depends situations. Um, the users need to understand whether this change is significant for their application or not. On the right-hand side is just like maybe one of my idiosyncratic jokes. The difference between homoousios and homoiousios. It's a very small edit distance again. It describes the nature of Christ in relation to God. Resulted in the first major schism of the Christian Church in the year 325 Common Era. And it's not very relevant anymore, except for some fringe denominations and theologians. So again, this is I took this example because of the user community to show this was really important a long time ago, but today nobody really cares about it. So applying these principles further has implications for other practices where we change things, because the changes might not happen within our repository, but between repositories. And this is the case in mirroring and republication, where we make data available on another platform. And this, what we say is when you mirror or republish data, you should always refer to the original source, which we call the authoritative version, and using the is identical to attribute in the DataCite metadata. We have suggested to the DataCite metadata working group to also introduce a new relation type that allows us to point to the authoritative version, not just say it's identical to or it supersedes. No, that both exist alongside, but the other one is this one is the authoritative one. And this explicit relationship between objects helps us to manage multiple items at the same that embody the same manifestation, so the same geotiff, but it's available through multiple portals, through multiple repositories. A bit of an edge case maybe, because the thing isn't there anymore, is how to deal with loss, deletions, or retractions. This is all, I think, very well documented already in practices published by DataCite and other persistent identifier providers who say, even if the data isn't available anymore, a persistent identifier should always resolve to the landing page that displays the metadata, even when the data set is not available anymore. If neither the data nor the metadata are available anymore, then the repository should publish what they call a tombstone page, that a tombstone that describes that this object is no longer available. And then I think increasingly we will also need to look at the issue of retractions, where um, the metadata displayed will have a release note describing that the data have been retracted. And then, of course, it's a question of how to cite, because this is where a lot of this question started from. How do we cite data? And the suggestion has always been to follow existing citation practices in journals. And what we usually want to do is we want to give credit to the creator of that data product. And we do this by citing the expression level of the data. But that leaves out the portal or repository where you got the data from, because you're citing potentially at a different level. And so by citing the item on the repository level, you would be giving credit to the infrastructure providing access to the data product. This leads to some interesting side effects when data are mirrored, because then the one repository gets the citation, the other one doesn't. And this overall might skew the metrics around the reuse or citation of the data product itself, which we would recommend citing the expression. So this is an unsolved problem, but this is not something that this group can solve, because it points to a structural, let's call it feature of the citation system that the community needs to work out how they want to handle it. A question that has been with data publication from the start is the question of what do we do with versioning of metadata, so the description of the data set. And while this was part of a data citation early on, it was then no longer used, because the organizations involved felt that this only caused confusion and didn't actually add any value. But this has changed, and I have to say that I also changed my position on this, because in the past I said there's no value in this, but recently with metadata aggregators and also data aggregators through AI applications that do reuse the metadata, it becomes important again. So there's a new use case for metadata identification and versioning in these new applications. So this means that human users and automated system must be able to distinguish between different versions of a metadata record, and need to be able to identify where this originally came from, because this has implications for the transparency, trustworthiness, and also data quality. This is not to imply that derived or enriched metadata are poorer than, or of poorer quality than the original ones, but it's important to know where they come from. So the provenance of metadata, something that we need to start looking at. And then when you use identifiers for both the data object and the metadata object, it's very important to explain to the users where the identifier is pointing to. Is it pointing to the data object, or is it pointing to the metadata object? Those who have seen similar presentations before might have noticed that we haven't introduced Ferber. And this is a deliberate experiment for this presentation, because we thought putting Ferber at the front of the presentation confused people. more than it explained things. So we now put it towards the back and said the overarching framework for all of this is the functional requirements for bibliographic records. And so far, we've talked a lot about this item level, which is the physical embodiment of data. These are the downloadable files. They could be paper copies as well. They could be data streams, but it's at that physical level where you actually physically access the data. But they come in a format, and they can come in different formats. And to be able to distinguish different formats, we took the term manifestation from Ferber. But this also points to the fact that even though they come in different formats, they have the same content. And this is where the level of expression comes in. And the expression is the data product that then comes in different formats and then is embodied as an item that you can download or pick up at the library. And all of this is encompassed in the concept of the work. The work is the intellectual and creative endeavor, the idea to create something that is then expressed as a data set, as a paper, as a video, the presentation of, or an interpretative dance. So we think that this framework really is able to describe all the patterns of how objects in the research lifecycle relate to each other. And this helped us find a suitable terminology for describing all those patterns. So this is why we adopted the Ferber framework as the basis for data versioning terminology and use it to develop actionable recommendations. And on the previous slide, I talked about this concept of a work, and this is really important. I think really also an important contribution this group can make to how we deal with this cosmos of papers and data and other artifacts that are part of the research endeavor, that the paper itself is not the full story. It's the shop front that showcases the idea, the interpretations, and our insight into this question. And the data is the underlying raw material that justifies those interpretations. And the paper acts as the bridge between the data and the broader understanding that it supports. And it's also important to recognize that the life cycle is not linear. In the process before we actually get to download anything, many digital artifacts are being created in this process, from conception of a research idea to the publication of data and the interpretations. And this idea is captured and discussed in a paper that we should cite here, published by Andrew Treloar and myself, where we discuss this life cycle. But the important point really is there's a lot that's happening before we get to the downloadable item, and this has then to do also with this curatorial process of selecting something that we want to release to the public. So in summary, the working group interest group created a framework and terminology to describe how data relate to other elements of scholarly communication. And we use this framework to develop actionable recommendations for data versioning. The recommendations have been discussed with data practitioners in a series of workshops, and not only at RDA. A summary has already been published as a report from the Berlin University Alliance, and a peer-reviewed journal publication is in preparation, and we hope to have this out quite soon. So I hand back to Ming to um, guide us through the discussion about whether the guidelines are clear enough, can be actioned, and how hard it would be to actually implement them. And again, pointing to the collaborative notes where we want to capture things, but we've also put in some information already about the our session at the last plenary meeting, because in this session, we don't want to go through everything again. There's a lot that has been captured for some of the recommendations, but there's still open questions. So over to you, Ming.
Thanks, Yan. Before we get down to discuss the individual recommendations, are there any questions, coming out from Yan's representation? Yeah. If no questions, Yan, do you want to still keep sharing, or we go to the switch to collaborative notes now, and all these recommendations captured in collaborative notes?
Okay, then I'll stop sharing. Do you want to share the
Yeah.
notes? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Choice. Desktop collaborative notes. Do you see these collaborative notes? I'll make
Yeah,
it
you can
bigger.
make them bigger.
Yeah. So let me move. Yeah. So so in as you said, in that after the principles, we have recommendations. I think it's six recommendations about um, revision, release, granularity, mirroring and republication, how deal with delete item, retraction, and capture provenance information, and discuss about format, that's in verbatim manifestation, and how to cite specific versions or give DOI to different versions, and versioning of metadata. So about six of them. So in previous plenary 24 and 25, we usually get until the top three recommendations, then our time is up. So you can read the notes from previous plenary for the top three recommendations. But today, we would like to change the order to go through that recommendations that haven't been discussed before. We haven't got any feedback. So we would like to get feedback. Does that recommendation make sense? Yeah. So the first one is the format. Manifestation format is like in body of the conceptual work that lead to the data collection. So we're talking about format like one data set could be have a CSV file, have a JSON file, have a database, in all formats. So there are format variations. Then the recommendation is the metadata of data product should list those format variations, but the PIT, the DOI usually at the that record level, not to individual DOI is not pointed to individual data variations. For example, not mint DOI for CSV or mint DOI for that. You could have a metadata record point to different variations. So yeah, think about this recommendation and write your reflection, especially if there are any exceptions or other practice we need take a consideration of when makes this recommendation. Yeah, we'll take a couple minutes to make reflections, then we can discuss about that.
Oh, that's a good question in the notes already. Are different
Yeah,
formats in the same place or in different repositories? And in one of the main use cases that we looked at, we see that um, in in the case we looked at, the different formats are held at different repositories. So this is the Aster mineral map of Australia, and Geoscience Australia, the National Computational Infrastructure, and CSIRO all hold 3 different formats of the same data products.
so there are no examples.
There are known examples, but when it then comes to what do you actually download, it's not that manifestation level. It's the
Data
physical
item.
embodiment as an item. And then I think we should include this in our collection, the National Virtual Core Library. We have this case where then the same manifestation is held by 5 different state geological surveys, and a collection of all of them is held at the National Computational Infrastructure, which is both, which is also mirroring example. It's primarily an example of mirroring onto a more performant platform.
Yeah, and thanks for whoever written that. Do you want to speak up? You can unmute yourself. We don't have many people on this call, so you can just unmute yourself and speak if you want to. Oh, Brit. Okay. Thank you, Brit.
So what we mean here is that um, they really have the same content. So they all share the same. They're all derived from the same expression, so the same data product, but they are manifested in different formats. So the content is the same, but the format is different.
Uh, yeah, format determine content to extent. So, yeah, Ari?
Yeah, just a kind of a question about this, because I think that the format here also assumes that it kind of completely still captures the same information, but I'm immediately thinking things like not lossless, but lossful compressions, like just a JPEG image of that the original data is a PNG and then you suddenly change it in the JPEG in somewhere, and it's not anymore exactly the same, but it is still the same picture in a sense, but it has lost information on the way. And so is that a different kind of yeah.
I think that's exactly the thing that we want to get at here is, so when we developed this, we were coming from the use case of hyperspectral satellite data. So we're talking about images, but images not in 3 color bands, but in 254 color bands. And you can't express, so the expression level here is a certain data product that is, say, an index value for specific mineral content, so derived from the spectral data. And this matrix of values is then cast into different formats, which could be a GeoTIFF, or it could be NetCDF, or it could be a JPEG. It could be a JPEG extraction of that. It could be colorized. It could be black and white. On the abstract expression level, it's all the same, but the formats, so the manifestations are all different. So yes, they're all different, but they are all derived from the same content on the level of the data product. One of the questions here is, do we need DOIs to identify that manifestation level, or aren't we really isn't the thing that we're really interested in then the physical embodiment as an item?
Yeah,
and then
I see what you mean, but I was just thinking in a perspective of just like a normal image, image used for research, and for some use cases, some repository might think that for this use case, it's perfectly fine to have a lossful compression of it, but it might be the same for some use cases, but for some other use cases, it would no longer be the same. So I'm just saying that these kind of processes of changing format might actually change the data for some of the uses and not for all.
It exactly does. It does. But what we say is, let's take the example of a photograph, and the data product is a photograph of, say, a plant specimen or a plant out in the wild. And then, so the data product is, say, a picture of a tree. And then this conceptual thing of picture of this tree is then available as JPEG and as a thumbnail or black and white image. All 3 different formats of the same thing. They're clearly different, but they all manifest the same data product, the same expression of picture of a tree, of a specific tree.
Yeah, I think I hope I pronounced your name right. So the suggestion here, if there are different forms, they should be linked in metadata by relation, like is a form of something. So that means you have a record to describe data set, then you point to I'm just interpreting if I understand this right. Then you have a DOI for each format, but the format for each format say that's the form of that expression or yeah.
That's a very good suggestion. That we
Yeah.
should add that.
Mm. I just thinking in library how they deal with the same book in paper version, in audio version, but probably they have a different what is that library called? Book back decimal. Yeah. But then linked to the same record in the yeah. That's probably you have a DOI for metadata. Metadata point to different formats.
Um, I think the expression is really important. Maybe that's also something that we learn from
Mm,
this session is that we need to go and reuse our Aster illustration to show why we need this expression level to express the idea, really
mm,
the abstract thing, the abstract concept of a data product that is then made available as downloadable files in different places and different formats.
mm. Yeah. So yes, that's good suggestion. Expression level DOI would be similar to German GND, which provide PIT for person, location, and the concepts. Yes, expression is more about the concept. Yeah.
I think that mixes different things of instances and classes, and that's not what we want to say with this.
Okay.
Maybe I'll dig up the illustration that we used in the past to explain what we mean.
Yeah.
When can I take over the screen
Yeah.
briefly?
Yeah. You can share that examples.
So this is a very busy diagram that um, prompted us to think about what do we mean when we talk about version, because we started out on the right-hand side with the items, where we saw that different repositories were holding different data formats of the same things. And we had no vocabulary to refer to what we meant by when we tried to describe the differences. So and this is where the expression level comes in. So we say the work here is actually not the Aster mission, but the mineral map of Australia. And this abstract conceptual entity of this work of the mineral map is expressed in 17 data products starting with the false color composite, Landsat, the thematic mapper, and so on. And these 17 expressions of the mineral map of Australia come in 3 different formats. They're that we call manifestations. And these the actual files that you can download are then available in different as items from a whole series of different repositories in different formats. And this is how we think these levels of expression, manifestation, and item play together. That in the end, the only physical form that you have is on the item level. But to describe how they all relate to each other, you have to go all the way up to the expression. And we think to say we have these 17 data products as expressions of the concept of the mineral map of Australia, manifested in 3 different formats and available as items from these repositories in those formats. And now we can take this all apart and apply identifiers where appropriate. And at least we can, even if we don't technically use identifiers, we can identify what we're talking about.
So, Jens, so here you see this diagram. If a format changes, from another format, does that mean belong to different expression? Because you have some reasons lead to that, like image reduction, or for example, then you it's still same work but different expression. Then you would have
No.
no.
So if I understood you correctly, then if we
Yeah.
say let's introduce JPEG versions of this, then the expressions don't change. We still have 17 expressions of the idea of the mineral map. But now we have a 4th manifestation, JPEG. And this would lead to another set of blocks at the item levels where those JPEGs can be downloaded.
Mm.
The false color composite is still the false color composite, but it needs to be embodied.
Yeah.
At the expression level, it's still abstract. But
Yeah.
it has kind of rules and content that need to be expressed.
So Jens, there is a question for this mineral map. Are there DOIs for the expression level or only on item level?
So right now we have, in this particular case, we only have DOIs at the item level because this is where you don't download things, and the landing page and the DOI resolving to a landing page.
Mm.
And this has implications for citation rates because the citation rates would only be reported for specific items, but not for all items of the same product. So let's take the false color composite. If that is downloaded from NCI, NCI gets the download numbers, not Geoscience Australia or the CSIRO data access portal, even though you could have gone there as well, for a different format in this case.
So, yes, I follow up your answer because I think this is still written by Botte. So, follow what you said. The question is, so citation rates only on item level as well, not accumulate for different formats.
That is the problem that we see with present practices, where we don't have a way of distinguishing whether somebody's counting the item downloads or the references to the expression level. So at the moment, we have no way of finding out how often references are made to, say, the false color composite. We can only count the references made to things downloaded from, say, NCI.
So then, what is that a relation from different formats to expression or manifestation, have counting the, for example, geoscience also should collect this data, then NCI or POSI distribute a different format, how GA gets credit for.
Well, actually, the question here would be the expression level was developed by the team around Carsten Laukamp and Tom Cudahy at CSIRO. So from an academic publishing perspective, they should be getting the credit for creating this false color composite. And then it's made available in different formats through a series of different portals who also want credit for making them available. So this is an unresolved conflict of interest that at the moment we don't know how to resolve.
So you share screen, so you don't get to see
I
the
don't see
comment.
them.
Yeah, I understand the problem when you share screen, you don't see. Then the comment is if the citation rate are openly available, they could be accumulated by a script. Yeah. I think the complex data citation interest group might deal with these issues, how to the accumulate or distribute that credit through citation.
Well, we should suggest it to them.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's covered at the moment, but we should suggest this use case to them.
To them. It's a pity Leslie had to join another session. Otherwise, she would know if this, yeah, probably use case for data citation interest group. Yeah, to both. Yeah. Thank you. Consider time. Should we move on to the next citation? So let me share. So citation, now we're talking about credits. The proposition is credit is given to creator of this data product by citing the expression, reference to the item support reproducibility, and give credit to infrastructure provide access to the resource. The recommendation is citation still follows the established practice for citation in scholarly communication, but that the practice is not universally accepted by all journals, and credit is given to creator of product by citing the expression. So that means we need a DOI for expression. Does that mean? And citing the item give credit to infrastructure that provides the accessibility to the data item level. So yeah, so this kind of relates to what we discussed about format. Yeah, please add your thought to this recommendation.
To also give an example of where this mattered was a discussion that we had in 2020 in the first virtual improvised plenary, and the first time the RDA plenaries had a late breaking session, and I think it was the only time, where Figshare had what they called republished data from Pangea without asking Pangea, and that caused a bit of a stir. And the concern was that, well, Figshare didn't replicate the full richness of the metadata of Pangea. And so and Pangea was upset about not getting the credit for the downloads of the data. So that led to this discussion that we had about what is happening here and what is problematic about this. Because Pangea publishes their data under Creative Commons by attribution. So downloading and republishing the data is absolutely fine. There's legally no problem with that. But the community felt that Figshare wasn't doing the right thing. So this highlighted this potential conflict when the same thing is available from different sources. Who gets the credit?
So yes, when Figshare republish Pangeas, they mint different DOI as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so this point about being able to point to the exact item for transparency and reproducibility, that is exactly the point.
Mm.
When they are identical, the question though is like, how do we count? Well, no, sorry, I'll retract that. That actually doesn't matter so much. There's a bit of a conflict for the authors of how they get credit when things are distributed or when things are mirrored, like in the Figshare case without prior agreement. How does this reflect on the authoritative source? So it's, the one thing is being able to point to the exact item used, and that is today's practice, and that is absolutely right that this is important for transparency and reproducibility. But then there's some other issues around attribution that need to be kept in mind.
Mm. So attribution and expression should be accumulate citation rate automatically. Yeah, that was comment.
So this is then something we should give to the data citation interest group, or what stage are they at?
Metadata interest group, metadata
Yeah.
working group.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, we should give we should talk to them about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems we agree that DOI should be at the item level. For the who come out the concept at the expression, then yeah, find a way to accumulate citation. Okay, so and next topic is versioning of metadata. So Ian said previous position was, we shouldn't version metadata, but now we coming shift this position. Metadata could be versioned depending on use case. Yeah. So
Let me explain why I
yeah.
said that in the past. In the past, I said um, those familiar with physical libraries and physical library catalogs, there was a library card and the book on the shelf. And if the content of the book changed, that is important. If I change the library card, but the book didn't change, what's the point? Who cares? So why version metadata if I'm actually only interested in the content? But as I said earlier, we have new use cases where this now is different.
Yes, I started to deal with health data 2 weeks ago. I can see metadata at a study level and the metadata at a data level because the researchers health data queried uh, construct query at a data level. That's part of metadata. So yeah, so that's why we need a version metadata because at the same raw data after different abstraction remove identity, you may abstract data level have a different description. Say before there are 100 population of certain conditions, now change it to 200. So that's big difference for people in that area. Then, yeah. Any thoughts about versioning metadata as well? I guess it's not only
Yeah, the data metadata enrichment really is the case.
by AI. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
The
we also
quite
see this in harvesting even without much AI when um, we have cases where in the Australian uh, in the OSCOP virtual research environment, we harvest a lot of metadata from various sources, but some of that is already harvested. So we harvest aggregated records from Geoscience Australia, and we have no way of telling whether we are actually harvesting the same record through Geoscience Australia as an aggregator and from an individual geological survey as the original source. We can't tell at the moment, but we should be able to make that distinction.
yeah, for harvesting metadata, should the dataset containing the harvest metadata, then its own data product be signed with own DOI. That's about data that data object package we talk about in the paper in the discussion. Yes.
And version here, I think, would also be in the sense of provenance, which is when we have harvested and aggregated and augmented metadata, we need to be able to find out about the provenance. So introducing this provenance information is something that we need to insert into the relevant harvesting protocols, because this is one of the challenges at the moment, that the APIs that we use don't provide that information.
Yeah, so the province we didn't discuss that for each release need have a release notes that explain what changes be made. It's not just timestamp and yeah, another source. There, yeah, need a yeah.
Yeah, the timestamp is a really good point. It just reminds me of an anecdote of harvesting a couple of years ago in a very different domain. A couple of
Also,
years ago, the shares
oh,
of United Airlines suddenly crashed because all the robots started selling United Airlines shares, and this algorithm was triggered by a publication in some Florida newspaper. And what had happened there was that somebody clicked on a much older news article about United Airlines filing for bankruptcy. And because this was in the middle of the night when the site had little traffic, this old article was featured as recently viewed, and then picked up by Bloomberg as as a hot trending item. And then the bots reacting to Bloomberg new business news suddenly picked up that United Airlines was filing for bankruptcy and then started selling shares, and trade had to be stopped to prevent the shares from crashing. And this all happened because the old article wasn't time-stamped. So in the recently viewed view, it looked as it were current. So even though this might sound quite academic in our context to talk about time stamping and harvesting, it can have real life implications.
Can I ask maybe a stupid question here about the metadata versioning? Came to my mind also about the session on resilience and political changes, because I do understand that also in US it was a case that that some of the governmental data was not deleted from the servers, but the metadata was changed, which means also that maybe the context how the data is understood can be changed by changing the metadata. And so you could have a copy of the same data in, let's say, in Europe with the original metadata, and then somebody maliciously, or not maliciously, depending on your viewpoint, changes the metadata with, for example, different terminology.
Yeah.
And is that an kind of, you should be somehow able to kind of point the difference, even though the data is the same, but the metadata has been changed for whatever purposes.
Yeah. I like that example because it illustrates the significance of the change. In my previous thinking about changes in metadata, there was no significance in the change. So I thought, why bother? But Ari, your example illustrates the significance of change and why this is important to know.
And also, of course, in this case, the original repository would not actually like to change the DOI pointing to it, but maybe the copy of, I mean, it isn't anymore the same, even though somebody copied it into some other repository, which also has the same original metadata. So it's a very odd use case.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very interesting. That's a great addition.
Yeah. So comments. Metadata changes should be transparent, but log files or similar means that's probably comes to the recommendation how we should use a version system, should keep logs of this change.
Should we segue into the versioning systems? Because we
Yeah,
don't have
segue
that
to
much
the
time.
versioning system. We have only 10 minutes left. So the versioning system we, recommend is like exactly what they said needed to keep tracking the file versions and also the changes made to that. And
So sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
Just to give some additional context,
yeah.
in the report produced for the Berlin University Alliance, they asked for specific recommendations around choosing technical systems. In our journal paper that's in preparation, we don't talk about this.
Oh, okay.
But in the report for the Berlin University Alliance, there are specific recommendations for choosing a versioning system. We touch on this in the journal paper by saying use Git or use this or that, but in the in the report it's made a bit more explicit.
Yeah. Just if we take this as a read, consider of time, is any reflection like you have thought on what kind of versioning system we would like recommend apart from already written here? Yes. Yes, there are proprietary software for versioning.
In the Berlin University Alliance brief, this was to give guidance to the Berlin universities and its institutes when they choose a versioning system, which one to choose. So that it wasn't a given. If you have a given system, of course, you have to deal with that framework. So yeah, so if you build a repository from scratch, I think you have a choice. And this might not be a public-facing repository. If you're further upstream in the data lifecycle, and you'd say you have you do the data management for a research project, you have choices, and that it might just be having a consistent naming system for the files that you keep in the shared drive.
Yeah. Thank you, Buddy, for writing that. Okay, we have 5 minutes left.
As a last bit, so when we think about versioning systems, we really can think about this whole spectrum of solutions that start from just being systematic about how you name your files and how you store them, and all the way to sophisticated time-stamped systems recommended by the dynamic data version. What was it called? The Dynamic Data Citation Working Group. By Rauber et al. But the simple end of the spectrum would be data carpentries.
Okay, so
okay, last few minutes.
Yeah, so that's great. We went through the recommendations we didn't have a chance to discuss before. So, is there any like overall suggestions for these recommendations or for this session? Are there any takeaway message, either for us or for yourself? Or for the community. It's pretty late for our European colleagues here, midnight.
Thank you very much, Birte, for your comments. They were great.
They're great. We capture that so that we will take all this into consideration, all the questions you and I raised. Yeah. And with that, yeah, if you don't have further notes, then we are at the end of the session. Yan, do you have any things to add?
Well, the question is, how do we proceed? So yes, we will, I think, prepare a report, but in conjunction with our publication. But the question also really is there more work needed? Does this interest group need to continue? Is there a desire to continue, or can we wrap it up after 10 years and say, let's go into maintenance mode?
Yeah, so in last plenary 25th, we thought that was the last plenary. We plan to wrap up, but a lot of discussion come up that there are unresolved, issues. So that's why we continued and had this session. What do you think?
Yeah, I do kind of agree with Pat, with Birte. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly, that they are still quite complex. And of course, I understand very well your examples, Jens, what you presented there from the Australian data, or Australian system data. But I think what, to me at least, kind of, yeah, it might be good to also. My problem really is that I haven't read your use case example paper, so I don't know what you have there, and how that can be presented in a let's say more down to earth way, because I've tried to explain this sometimes for some researchers, and they were not very impressed with this whole exercise. So I kind of agree with the fact that it is by definition a little bit of a library science feeling thing, where it is actually originating from. And I don't know what is the solution for that.
We could we could make so. This to me sounds like we need to continue the interest group a little bit and develop um, like a cheat sheet, like 10 points to systematic data versioning, which
Yeah,
would be quite similar to data carpentry, maybe, but then have maybe 2 or 3 sheets for different levels of complexity.
I would what I would actually like to kind of get, which was kind of implied here many times, like which version or which level should you cite, and what are the implications of this. I think that should be maybe made more clear, because these are policy choices in a sense.
Mm,
That what is the level, what you are intending for different use cases, that and what is the implication of it, and also of the fact that what you was kind of mentioned here as well is that in a lot of cases your technology cannot do this, or you need to write additional scripts, but nobody writes these scripts, they don't really exist. So to kind
mm,
of clarify these things, what should be changed to get this versioning system to actually be implemented by in general by the scientific community, and so that people would understand it, and what are the requirements from the infrastructures also, like the versioning system which was mentioned,
mm.
and I mean getting these into like actionable things for different stakeholders, also describing what you can do with this, which you can't do otherwise. That's kind of my
Yeah,
immediate thinking right now.
yeah, that is great feedback. Thank you, Ali.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's takeaway message. We need to tailor these kind of things to different audience for practical reason. Cool. So thank you very much. We come to the time. Thank you very much for very interesting, fruitful discussion. Yeah. Um, hopefully we will continue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good night. Good
Good
night.
night, Ali. Good
Don't
night,
think of data
wherever you are. I think
versioning
it's
your dream.
bedtime.